Good evening. Thank you very much, Ben. I'm delighted to be here. I hope that I have a couple of interesting things to say, but whether I do or not, I'm very honored to have the opportunity to say them. Success. That's a very tricky concept. I think it is very important if we're going to talk about success, especially in my world of dealing with family-owned businesses. So it's primarily business success. We need to get on the same page as to what we're talking about, what the definition is. There, of course, is the success that the public sees. There's everything that we can observe just by seeing somebody and their public role. But then, of course, there's also that feeling inside a person, and either a feeling of fulfillment, of accomplishment, based on what is important to that person inside. Take, for example, Michael Jackson. Was Michael Jackson a success? Well, if you're looking at what we all saw in public, he probably was the most successful entertainer in the history of entertainment. He was a writer, he was a singer, he was a dancer, he was a producer. He was an absolute genius as far as what we saw in his performance, the public display. But then with every person who has achieved some level of success in the public arena, there's that opportunity to sit in a room where there's just a friend, maybe a spouse, a close advisor. The doors are shut, there are no cameras, there are no customers, there's no public there. So Mike, do you feel like a success? Now, I don't know what Michael Jackson would say in response to that if we were in that private room and he was bearing his soul. But maybe he would say what a lot of artistic, a lot of accomplished people say, and that is they're already moving on to their next project. We're complimenting them for the success they had, something that they did, a song they wrote, or a performance, or a book they wrote, or something they did. We're asking them to look back and relive the experience that we had enjoying whatever it is they did. But most of these high-performing people, mentally, they're already on to the next thing. They'll say thank you, appreciate it, but if you really capture, if you really see how they're thinking and how they're approaching life, they're already moving on. And also maybe Michael Jackson would say, well, my 2 marriages were a complete joke. And if he was honest, maybe he also would say, you know, there are a lot of people who do what I do every day to get through the day and to get to sleep at night, and they're in prison. So I'm just a junkie. Am I really Michael Jackson? Am I really the person that I'm proud of and the person that I always aspired to be? So there are really 2 levels of this conversation, what we see and what's really going on. Let me give you a much less dramatic example. My brother James is, by all measures, a very successful author. If you wrote a book today and you said, what are the odds that a of some area and then write something that people would really enjoy reading and talk about. That's one of my unfulfilled dreams in life, which I probably will never fulfill. My other unfulfilled dream in life is to be bilingual. And at the age of 58, I decided that I was going to learn Spanish. And I will accomplish that goal of being bilingual. So now let's take that real personal, close the door. It's just 2 or 3 of us talking to my brother James. Very interesting. James, you are a very successful author. And like any creative, artistic person, he's already on to his next project. So he'll say thank you. I appreciate it. That was very nice of you to say. Mentally, he's gone. He is way beyond this conversation. But also, he would say, well, yes, I have enjoyed some success. But then he'd say, Mark, look at you and Anne. That's the name of my wife. You have community. You have roots. You know people. You go away, but you know where you're coming back to. Now, I've lived all over the world, but I don't have a sense of community like you do. I don't have roots. Now, of course, I see, wow, look at all you've done and look at all the opportunities you've had. And he appreciates that, but it's always interesting to see what he points out that I have that he doesn't have. The point of all this is, in talking about success, there's what we all see out there in public, and then there is the inward looking. It's really the evaluation of what is important to you, what's going to give your life meaning, and at the end of the day, whether you feel comfortable in your own skin with the way you have played the cards that have been dealt to you. Now, I was asked to talk about the path to success. And I have an interesting perspective in that I have had the privilege of sitting across a table, sometimes at the kitchen table, of families who own businesses for the past 36 years. I'm a lawyer, and what I do is work with people to get the business from the senior generation to the junior generation, to decide what form of business this ought to be, to plan for the succession of ownership successfully, so that this business hopefully would be in this family in the 2nd generation, the 3rd generation, maybe even longer. It's very fulfilling work, especially when people sit down and they say, this is what we're trying to achieve. We have no idea how to get there. But with your experience, your training, and we've been referred to you that you might be someone who can help us. So to me, it's just putting a big puzzle together. And it's very rewarding to me, especially when people say, we've been at this for 3 or 4 years, we've talked to 5 different people, and we still haven't gotten this figured out. To be able to deliver a product and say, here's a path, here's what you ought to do, here are the documents that'll make it work, and I'll be here to advise you along the way. That has given me the opportunity to see firsthand, that public display of success in business, but also to listen to those innermost thoughts, especially of the parents, about their goals, their aspirations, what they think about some kids, what they think about some other kids. But to really get the inside, closed-door, private conversation, and also what the public sees in terms of, is this person a success? And there are some characteristics that I've identified that seem to be common to most of these people. And I'd just like to go through those characteristics with you. First of all, a common characteristic for all of these people that I've gotten to see, with success being the outward success, you look and you say, wow, this business is successful, but people who also have some balance in their life. Some people who are comfortable with where they are, what they've done. That's the kind of successful person I'm describing. One characteristic is these people work very, very hard. Now, I'm not talking about workaholics, because those are the people who don't have the balance in their life. But I'm talking about the people who are comfortable at home, are comfortable at work, and if you're trying to define some characteristics common to these high-achieving, successful people, they work very, very hard. And in the early years, just as Amy told us, they maybe are making $1 or $2 an hour, but they're doing it. They're committed to achieving what they set out to do. Another characteristic of these people is they're very, very focused. They have the ability to shut out a lot of the extraneous things that are going around that pull a lot of us away from staying intently focused on a goal. They have that ability. Another characteristic of these people is they have a passion for something. Now, I don't mean a passion for making money. My experience is that money is usually the byproduct of something that a person cares about very much in achieving. Starting a business, achieving a certain record of sales, making a product, or trying to figure out a device, a technique, a way of doing something that just happens to be more clever, more efficient, just more attractive than anybody else has been able to figure out. That's what seems to drive these people. And the financial success is a byproduct of it. I've rarely met anybody where their primary goal was to make money. Now, I personally don't know many investment bankers on Wall Street, but that's an example of a job that if you just were out after making money, be an investment banker, where the whole idea of the deal is to make a lot of fee revenue. But most of the people I've had experience with, the money is a byproduct of trying to do something useful, trying to do something better, trying to do something more creative. Another characteristic of these successful people, generally, they're very positive people. They're not negative. They see the glass and it's half full. Part of the reason that this positive attitude goes along with their success is they need people. They need people around them. Nobody can do it alone. Positive people attract other positive, creative, high-performing people. And there's an energy that comes from these positive, forward-looking people. They attract other talent that helps them be successful. In any business, small, medium, large, it is surprising to a lot of people, especially when they get out of school and they enter the private business world, how many opportunities there are. It might be in a week, it might be in a month, it might be a couple times a year. But how many times you have an opportunity to decide on an ethical issue? Fairness, honesty with your customers, honesty with your employees. The ethical position of most successful business people, in my experience, is very admirable. It's extremely gratifying to be in a room. Again, it's the closed door. Nobody's going to know what was said at all. And you see the head of a family business being confronted with making a decision. Do we do this, which would be the right thing to do, the thing that you could openly talk about and share with your family and your customers and the Internal Revenue Service, or are you going to do this? Cutting a corner, just trying to shave a little bit. And it's very gratifying when that question is presented, the topic is there, and that business owner, after about a second pause, says, we have to do this. This is the right thing to do. This is what our family stands for. This is the kind of people we are. That's a characteristic, and it's just an absolute thrill to see that in action. Another characteristic of these successful people, they read. They read and they study. We see the results. We see the performance. We see the success. We see the growth. We see the sales. But something that you notice about these people is with their intensity, with their focus, they're always looking for a better way to do it. And hardly any of them just sit down and think of a better way. They read, they study, they're looking for additional information. They're looking for information to base new thoughts on. This isn't always so apparent. I'll give you an example. I have a friend who is a deputy sheriff, and in his job, he's good. He's not the best, he's not the worst, he's good. But where his passion and his intensity is, happens to be in firearms. Shotguns and rifles specifically. Now, if you said to my friend, Bob, when's the last time you read a book? He might have to really stop and think when the last time is that he read a book. And it may be 10 or 15 years ago. But if you went into his home, where he has this unbelievable collection, everything is orderly, lined up in an orderly fashion, it's all perfectly maintained, and I don't know, there are probably about 40, 45, 50 shotguns and rifles. And he can tell you the characteristics of every single firearm. And he can talk like an expert, which he is. But then what you see to the left of all this display are stacks of these magazines on all these firearms, anything that a collector would need to know, everything about the manufacturing. That's his specialty. That's the area where he is an expert. And my point is, that's what Bob reads. And he has that common characteristic with other successful people. His isn't a business, his happens to be his hobby, but it's the same characteristic. Another thing about these successful people, they take care of themselves. It's pretty tough to be successful if you're sick. It's pretty tough to be successful, which takes a certain degree of intensity, a certain degree of time commitment, obviously, if you end up being ill because of bad decisions in taking care of yourself. So generally, these people don't smoke. These people might drink, but they don't drink to excess. These people are not dependent on drugs. These people are consciously thinking about their own personal health and welfare because they know there's a direct connection to being able to perform at a high level and fulfilling their goals. So these are the characteristics that I've found in common with the people in central and northern Wisconsin that I've had the privilege to work with over the past 36 years. And when it's all said and done, probably the biggest test of where you're going with your own ideas about success, whether it's in business or just as a human being, is to think about what ought to be on your epitaph. And when I think about my own role in this world, what I would like on my epitaph is, he was a good husband, he was a caring father, and he was bilingual. Thank you very much.